Mary? You guys got to unmute.
We mute until the meeting starts.
Okay.
So any of the conversation that's happening in the room is not live streamed because we're live streaming right now.
Oh, hi, everybody. It's 4:30. Do you know where your children are? Are we going to unmute?
Call the executive committee meeting to order. Read the affidavit of posting. Agenda was posted in the office of county clerk on the 9th day of September 2021. Notice was sent to the West Bend Daily News, the Express News, WIBD, WNBC Radio, WTKM Radio, My Community Now, Hartford Times Press, Kewaskum Statesman, and the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. We have a quorum. Supervisor Mahalik is on Zoom. Begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is consent agenda. Entertain a motion, Bossert and Kelling. Any corrections, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? I'd like to move action item 6C to the front. Potential budget transfer to fill 2022 County Board FTE position in 2021.
But that really is anxious to spend the money.
Okay. Motion by Dennis and second by Schleif. Is there any discussion on this matter?
Just
We
wanted
heard a
to
little bit
add,
about it.
Tim, did you have some?
Yeah, could we hear just a little bit more about it?
Sure, Ashley's going to be speaking.
so this position is actually the position that I brought up at the administrative committee level. So we're not hiring a person under the county clerk's budget. It's actually going to be under the county board's budget. And it is budgeted for 2022 and moving forward. The person who fills this position will actually sit in the county clerk's office, but assist the county board with policy research, legislative research. They'll also assist with committee agenda and prep, minute taking. They'll run the cameras for Swagit once that is installed in the new boardroom, amongst other clerical things in support of the county board.
Thank you.
And will act as a legislative liaison for us also, for the county board.
I did want to just add to the motion, if we could, if it would be acceptable to you, Supervisor Kelling and Supervisor Schleif, to post the position prior to the resolution going to the county board in October, so that we can post it sooner than that, and then potentially have those interviews right after the county board were to either accept or deny the resolution.
And there is, I don't know if Aaron wants to speak to it, but we do have the monies available to start that position on November 4th. Either Mary or Mary, do you want to speak to it or?
Sure. So the savings that were realized on travel, as well as the video savings from not having the city of West Bend videoing the conference anymore, Aaron ran the numbers and we could fill the position starting November 4th with that pay period. And it would be a wash with the money that we're saving in those two areas.
So that's why we want to get that posted as soon as possible. County Executive Showman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you just have, if you're open to it, Mr. Chairman, have the Budget and Policy Director talk a little bit about how it's funded for 22 and 23? Because I think that's helpful for anybody watching and for you guys to understand how it works.
Yep.
It's not, we're adding a new position, but it's really not adding new expense,
Right. Yeah, could you?
or not a lot of new expense, I should say.
Good, thank you.
Good afternoon. So moving into 2023, there's as you'll hear about in the county board's budget, we're planning to budget for a reduction in the number of supervisors from 26 to 21. Essentially, that saves about $35,000. So those savings will be used to fund a portion of this position. There's a number of other cost savings built in to the budget around some purchase services. Yes, that's correct. There's purchase services costs that are going away in the county board budget specifically, but then the county clerk's office is eliminating some of the mailroom assistance that's been historically in their budget. So there are some savings identified there as well. So all that sort of helps to fund this position on an ongoing basis. It frees up tax levy.
Do you have that amount that the mailroom position saving offhand?
And yeah, it's about 15,000.
Supervisor Dice?
Is this different than the policy director position that's talked about? What is the title of this position?
So we have not determined what the title will be yet. I'm actually working on that right now in addition to the job description. But this position it was kind of an aid to the county board and to my office. We originally had talked about hiring someone in our office specifically, just because passports and marriage licenses have been increasing. This person being able to take on the duties of committee prep, agenda, compiling all of the agendas, and then taking the minutes allows my staff to focus on those other items that we handle in our office in addition to the elections and whatnot.
The full-time position,
Yes, this will be.
but it's all the expense of it is assigned to the county board agenda. Correct?
Yes, all of the expense of this position will be assigned to the county board. Mhm.
And then, do you or
So it will be a combined effort of the county board chair and then my office, so myself, or my office supervisor, Mary.
okay.
Any other?
And then the other question I had was on the committee report that we were furnished. It says the annual salary is 50,000 with full benefits. That means that all the benefits are included?
The salary and benefits costs in the budget, we're showing it in the budget, it's actually 79,000. So that 50,000 must have been the salary amount.
Okay. So are there any specific requirements for this position?
We've discussed what type of experience this person will need, but I'm working with Todd Scott and Aaron on coming up with what the requirements will be prior to posting in as far as education requirements. And then experience, we really are looking for someone who has experience at the state level, possibly with working with legislators and such, so that they will be able to assist the board in that manner. And then also having that experience will likely bring them experience with taking minutes for meetings or clerking meetings too.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Schleif?
Thank you. There's a lot of moving parts here, and I know we talked at some point about a person helping to write the resolutions, which is something that Brad has done, but is this all part of the picture here for this person?
I believe so. It'll assist in any specific resolutions that the county board would like, and the prep will, I guess, assist the county attorney's office, correct?
Well, normally what happens when someone wants a resolution ordinance drafted, they submit that to, there's a group that we've created of us who get that. And it usually comes up with a request to draft. And most of the time I'm either drafting the resolution or I'm reviewing it once it's been drafted to make sure that it complies with the law and so on. And I don't think that's going to change. I think what it does is it gives you an assistant to maybe do some of that work that sometimes I'm having to dig up information to put a resolution or background together for you. I think this person probably assist in that regard. And of course, I'm still always here and intend to do that work as needed. But I think this is more of to help gather the background and help come up with the resolutions that you need.
Thank you.
Yeah, we envision the position to be not only a liaison to the legislative, liaison to the county attorney, liaison to just about everything. So rather than having to call a director directly, you can contact this person and that person will set the table for you, whether you need to go and actually speak with it or if that can be presented to the director also. So it'll be your go-to person. So if you make a phone call in here, that's who you're going to call first. Supervisor Bossert.
Just for some context on this, we are still on the overall budget on target to reduce not just the rate, but the levy. How much are we on target to reduce the levy by currently?
I'll let County Executive Showman speak to that.
In the full biennium, the budget that you're going to get in October as an executive committee will reduce the levy by $1 million. That is to say, we're not going to take net new construction plus we're reducing by $1 million. So total, that's about 2.2 million. That will be less than what we could take.
And that's a product of the good work that our county executive is doing and our county board in supporting the county executive. Yep, and our department heads and all of them together, funding this position to help support the county board so we can continue to be part of that process effectively and efficiently, I think fits within the spirit of reducing the number of county board seats, because that was ultimately about efficiency and accountability. When we were 30, it was really hard to be efficient. As we keep moving our board size down, we're becoming more efficient. So in my view, I think this is a good position to fill and I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Mary.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Mr. Bossert. I think this is the kind of thing we've been needing, just kind of, and I hate to use the word gopher, but that's really what it sounds like we're getting down to here. Someone who can fill the cracks, such the clerk's office isn't trying to do this, and this. And we got somebody reporting directly to the chair of the county board to be that intermediary, such that we're not including the executive group in this. I think it's the sort of thing we need, whether you want to call it a coordinator, whatever it is. Every department somewhere in every organization has got one. It's the person who fills the gap, fills the holes, and makes sure everything is taken care of. And I think it's very important. I fully support this, sir.
Thank you. Supervisor Mahalik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's also important to realize that with the movement of going from a county administrator to a county executive, there is always a little bit of an adversarial movement between the county board and any county executive. I know we all get along with our current county executive, but it's a great idea to make sure that we have the representation and to make sure that we have an avenue to these other areas like the state legislature, irrespective of what the county executive does. We often work in lockstep and that's important. But again, like Supervisor Bossert and Supervisor Mary have elucidated, it's important for us also to have it. And obviously, the funding is certainly there, especially considering you're going from 26 to 21 supervisors. It's that much more important for each one of us because we're going to be representing more people to make sure that we have what's necessary to make sure that the county board and all of the people that we represent can be heard, and they're heard through us. And we need additional help in that area, and this will provide that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll vote on this. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, passes. Thank you. Back to discussion items. Community Development Block Grant Remodeling Update. Scott, be coming up forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Inside the packet, you'll see a rather lengthy plan set. This is the near final plan set. So this is going out to bid on the 21st. So if you have any comments, it's kind of now is the time to speak on those. A couple of things that did come up, questions that we'd like to ask you is, number one is at your current desk, there's drawers down below. Some of you may use them. Do you want the new desks to have drawers? I know this is getting down into the weeds, but we want to make sure that you are, I hear one yes for a drawer.
Yes.
Okay, two. Okay.
It's kind of handy to have.
Okay.
a drawer.
Okay.
So I keep my lifesaver.
The second question is, right now we are planning when we demo this room that everything, well, except for the chairs and the microphones and stuff like that, would then become the property of the contractor to get rid of or sell. For instance, the benches that we sit on here, your old desks. Do you have any sentimental value to that?
No.
Okay, so we will just have that as part of the contractor's responsibility to remove, and they can certainly, if they feel the need to, auction it off or
Good.
sell it off if they see value to it.
Are we keeping the same chairs?
The chairs are staying, yes.
Thank you.
There's also that, if you recall, as part of the grant, we
Oh.
came through and,
Can I chime in real quick? We're moving kind of quick here and I wanted to, so Tim mentioned one of my concerns, the chairs, because these chairs are in great condition. There's no need to replace them. He
Right.
mentioned the microphones, the benches, rather than buy new benches, if there's a way we can keep those, or, I mean, if there's not, then yeah. Yeah. I mean,
we were looking at putting in chairs that were movable in case you want to, remember the half wall you have there is movable, and then the chairs behind that would be interlocking but movable.
gotcha. Sort of like some of the churches have those interlocking chairs. Yeah, gotcha. I think the TV sets and the AV stuff, that's all gonna stay, right?
There'll be actually, I'll let Ashley certainly speak more, but you're gonna have TVs in all four corners now with this setup.
But the two we have, we're gonna keep, or one we have, we're gonna. Okay, I just want to make sure anything that we can save to reduce the cost of this, we can reuse.
Yes, same thing with the two cameras that you see kind of in the corner,
Yeah.
gonna get repurposed, so
Okay,
if you want any more AV questions, so, yes.
yeah,
Yeah, the only thing that will be removed are the projector screens, or they'll stay up. I'm not sure if we're removing them or just leaving them up there for now. And then the two projectors, but we'll keep those as property of Washington County, so we'll be able to repurpose them somewhere else when the time.
so the room won't actually have projectors anymore, just the TV screens. Gotcha. Yep. Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
And to climb back on, so you approved, I remember, $50,000 for, call it incidentals for the project. Again, we're trying to use as much of that $1,053,000 grant as possible, but some things weren't included. So we're working on that list right now. And as part of the CIP, probably bring that back to see stuff. For instance, they included the refinishing of the walls, but only this wall, because we're redoing the wall, that's redoing the doors for the ADA access. They don't think we need to do the other walls for ADA access, but it looked very weird refinishing this wall, especially with the lower area, and not doing the other three. So there's expenses like that. A lot of the AV expenses are not going to be included. So we're trying to get that number down. For instance, the new chairs in the background, the new desks where the county executive would sit. are not eligible. So we got as much as eligible as possible. There are still some out there, and we're going to get that number together for you so you'd have that and know what is eligible and not eligible in that or most of it.
So before we get too far, the projectors, what is the age of those? Those are
Those are extremely new, so they'll last many, many, many years. I mean, I'm not sure how long the bulbs have as far as their lifetime, but it's a long time because we hardly ever use them.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I guess I'm also looking at the projectors and the screens, if those can be reused. AIS is dire need of good AV equipment to update their facilities. If those could be reused, if they're of a condition as such, I have no idea what their status is. And those remotes go up and down. The projectors, as you say, basically on something like that, you got to replace the bulbs on an occasional basis so they maintain their brightness. But just a thought, if we can salvage some of this to be used elsewhere on county property, for heaven's sakes, let's do that.
We are, as Ashley pointed out, we are definitely salvaging that. We just don't have a plan in place yet. So anything like that, it's your property. So.
Okay, any more further questions for Scott?
And just as a reminder, we are looking at starting construction near the end of December. And so basically January, February, March, and hopefully done by then if all the supplies come in and everything else. You'll be in the sheriff's training room for those board meetings. And most likely the committee meetings will be upstairs in 2024 with Ashley and Mary have done a good job of coordinating that with the sheriff and letting them know of those situations.
Cool. Right. Thank you. All right. Hey, thank you. 22, 23 department budgets.
Thank you. So to get this meeting started, I just wanted to give a quick process update before we dive into the budgets. We've been working on this since April, developing assumptions and things like that. Moving into June, then we trained departments and we issued tax levy targets. Then in July, departments entered their budgets. In August, we had department budget presentations to the county executive. And, as you know, we had the standing committee chairs attend those meetings as well as the county board chair. So that, they gave them the opportunity to provide some input and ask questions, and really thought that was beneficial. So now standing committees are getting a preview of the county executive's budget. The whole budget is going to be discussed on the 20th at the public hearing. Again, it'll be back in front of this group. So to Josh's earlier point, you'll see the full budget at that time. And then the budget will be up for adoption on the 10th of November at the county board meeting. So for for the standing committee meetings, we're going to run them similar to prior years, in that we'll go through the budgets kind of in order as they're shown in the packet. I'll sort of note all of the big changes and the big initiatives within each of these budgets. We've got, department heads and certainly the county executive here to speak to other aspects of their budgets if there are any questions. But please, stop me along the way. But for the most part, we'll keep things moving fairly quickly through the budget. So as usual, there's some narrative on the big ticket items in these budget book pages, as well as the financial tables. After those financial tables for the standing committee meetings, we also have, capital outlay requests, position requests, and, different items to sort of supplement what's actually in these budget book pages. So to start off with, the departments that are, that report to the executive committee, I'll just jump right into the county attorney's budget.
Supervisor Dice.
Before you start with the county attorney, I'm just looking at that very first page where it's functional area summary. Can you give me some examples of what other sources, uses, and transfers are? To me, that's a very vague term. I don't know what that covers.
Sure, that's largely an accounting term. So it's when you use fund balance, or when you've got a situation, for example, like in the parts where the golf course transfers dollars to the parks department so there's that $120,000 transfer that happens. Stuff like that is built into those lines.
So what then is the amount under the county board for 2022? It shows $76,364, and then in 23, there's a $78,682 amount.
Sure,
So what
that's use of fund balance for the policy director. We'll talk about that when
Oh,
we get to the
okay.
county board
is
budget,
that
but
position?
correct. So that's the
Okay.
use of fund balance is what
All right.
that's,
Okay, thank you.
sure. Um,
I don't want to call you out of order.
So moving into the county attorney. Here, actually, take one step back. I'm going to use terms like cost to continue budget in some of these areas. When I say that, I mean simply the normal wage and benefit cost increases that we see, the normal, any incremental contract increases. A lot of that stuff we consider cost to continue. So I don't necessarily point those out unless something, additional is happening to those. So I'll note cost to continue a couple of times throughout the night here, but just so you know what that means when I say. County attorney, there's a position change here. There's a mix of position changes here in this budget. They're all really related to transitioning the CHIPS cases, children in need of protective services. That caseload is being transitioned from the district attorney to the county attorney's office. So basically, this budget plans for a deputy county attorney. That's a change from an assistant county attorney. It also increases a legal secretary position from part-time to full-time. There are some of these costs, so some of those costs are then offset by changing a legal secretary changing a legal secretary to an administrative assistant position. There was some cost savings generated there. So the total net impact of these changes is about $17,000. Other than that, this budget is largely a cost to continue budget. There is a change in interdepartmental for child support. That's really a technical change. It's due to a reduction in how our indirect costs are allocated. We allocate some indirect costs out to various grant funded departments. And given the way the report came back this year, some of those costs shifted out of here and into other areas of the county. Brad, did you have anything to add? Otherwise, that was.
No, it really is a budget where I joke around. They kind of give us the numbers and we plug them in. And that was, we referenced that position change at the county board meeting when the board passed the resolution for my office to take on the CHIPS caseload. We increased our part-time legal secretary to full-time to handle the extra work we'll be taking on. But by and large, it's I think a fairly routine and minor change for what we're doing. So thank you.
All right, if there are no questions on that budget, I'll move into the county board's budget.
Supervisor Dice.
Thank you. I'm looking at the page where it talks about child support agency non-4D fees.
Yes.
It's got three letters, A, B, and C, where you're asking to impose a fee for different reasons. $40 fee. Are these statutory or is this something that is new that's being added?
No, those are our statutory fees. Yeah.
Oh, that answers that question. Thank you.
And a lot of times, so you'll see fee schedules, you'll see some in human services budgets as well. That's an annual thing that we just do so that you can see them and, understand them. So. Any other questions?
Okay, moving on to county board.
All right, moving to the county board's budget. As I mentioned earlier, this budget is planning for 21 supervisors in 22 and 23. So 2022, we obviously have some of that year with 26, but then we're, in April, essentially is when the reduction would take place. As I mentioned earlier, also, we are continuing to budget 40% of the policy director pay in this budget, and that's through 2023. So that's funded with one-time use of fund balance in each of those years across the biennium. So instead of levying for those costs that aren't going to continue, we're going to use the fund balance that is accumulated to fund those instead. And then finally, the position is also in here, the cost of the position that we just talked about. So about $79,000 on an annual basis. So unless there are questions on that specifically, those are the notes that I had on this budget, unless, Don or Mary want to add anything. So.
Any more questions on county board budget? Okay, we can move on.
Moving into the county executive's budget, though, this is largely a cost to continue budget. We are showing a slight increase above normal, moving from 21 into 22. We just had a change in positions that happened in 2021. So moving into 2022, there were some slightly, there were some additional costs moving into 22. Are there any questions on the county executive's budget?
Seeing none. Oh, sorry, Supervisor Dice.
My question is, where it talks about this higher paid position in 2022, what is that position?
It represents a shift from gosh, I'm trying to think of Ethan's Ethan's position title. I can't remember it. It's going from Ethan to Catherine.
He's a coordinator.
PAC, Public Affairs Coordinator,
Thank you.
to a communications position. It was hired in at a higher rate, and so when you move from one budget to the next, it looks like it's more, but we're currently incurring those costs today.
Okay. And then we're creating a county executive intern position?
Correct. Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot about that one.
I didn't.
So yes, there's an intern position in this budget to the tune of about $13,000.
Have you had interns in the past?
Yes.
Were they always paid?
Yes and yes. So I think the most recent was Josh Strasser. Before that, it was Jack Rettler. They were paid. This is budgeted for year round. I don't know if we haven't actually had that or at least not quite year round. So it could be slightly less. We're also paying $14 an hour, is that right? Which is higher than what we've done in the past, but that's because of everything that's going on right now. So that, yes, they have been paid. The most recent one, we just had an intern over the summer. It was an unpaid internship that we gave like a stipend at the end, $1,000 stipend or something like that at the end. But the reason we put it in this budget is because full-time is because, especially with the newsletter now coming up, it's not the writing the articles that's the issue. It's the coordinating with the printer and formatting the document and getting all the pictures, and kind of is really tasky kind of work, but it's really good stuff that an intern can do instead of paying somebody $50 an hour or more to do.
So I'm just curious, how did these young people come to your attention, or? how
Well,
does
it
this-
was a lot harder when I was county administrator to find them, but now that I'm county executive, they're coming to us without us looking.
Oh,
Which has been interesting, but there's a lot more people who are interested in working for the county executive position. So they're contacting us when they graduate college or when they're in their summer
okay,
period of time.
all right, thank you.
Mhm.
Pardon me?
It's a little bit better on your resume.
Right. The last intern we had has now worked in like every level of government. They worked for Congress, they worked in the state legislature, and now they worked in the county executive's office. And just like Don said, they're kind of proud to wear the badge of honor that they've been at every elected level. And we're proud of her too.
You have more questions? Okay. Anybody else? Okay,
All right.
moving on.
Well, so that's it for the departments that report to the executive committee. There is another section to the budget packet that is not department specific, but it's the entire county. So usually this is sort of a technicality that, we include this in the budget, but we wanted to take this piece to the executive committee specifically, since there's some moving parts in here. I won't spend a lot of time on the technical ones that I just referenced, but I will hit the highlights of the moving parts that I mentioned. So this also has a functional area summary, but I will move through that one into the individual budget sections themselves. So starting with capital improvement program, there are lots of different financial tables in here, just given the way our chart of accounts separates things out. But the bottom line is that it all ties out and funds the projects that were approved in the CIP. It uses the sales tax and the other revenue sources in the amounts that were approved in the CIP. And so that's what this page or these pages reflect for the CIP. So moving into the next section, which is debt service. There are some costs. If you look in the 2021 budget for a moment, there are some costs in here that are from the debt that was issued in 2018 for some highway projects. The tax levy shown in this area is related to that debt issue. Moving into 2022, you'll see some additional costs of about $1 million in here. That's related to the pending debt issue for the sheriff's radio project. So, again, as we talked about with the CIP, these debt service costs are going to be funded with sales tax, and that is reflected in here. So again, the levy amount is only for the 2018 debt. It's not for the new debt.
County Executive Shulman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Aaron. I just want to point out two things. And I know Aaron will get to one of them a little bit later, but it's important in the context of that capital improvement plan. Our sales tax projections have changed, and you're going to see that in just a few minutes. All of the projects in the CIP are fully funded, but it has given us some additional flexibilities in the biennium. You'll see that in a few minutes and how we're trying to handle that. More importantly, relative to our debt, the way that sales tax is working, including paying off the EDWC revolving loan fund, the double down, as I referred to it for a period of time, that is what's becoming free now to help us pay for this debt. And I know you know that, and I've told you that before, but first I wanted to remind you. And second, that's important to understand, because what we're doing again is a humongous capital improvement project without borrowing on the debt levy. So the way that levies work, there's an allowance for net new construction, which you know about. There's also an allowance for any new debt you take on. That's not the case in schools, but it is the case in counties and local governments. So we have the ability to tax for that $1 million of principal and interest payments by doing what you're doing through the capital improvement plan, and then through the debt section of the budget that you just looked at. You're foregoing $1 million of available levy, and instead you're supplanting it, if you would, with sales tax, which, you know, is what we're supposed to do, but nobody does that. So you're doing the opposite of what everybody else does, and you should know that. And it's important to understand with how the totality of this budget works, because that created humongous windfalls for really us to do a lot of things, really conservative things in this budget, and add a position for the county board and do some other exciting things like that. So I just want you to realize those are really big numbers that you can kind of get glassy eyed over, but that they're really big policy decisions that you're contemplating right there.
Thanks, Josh. No,
Thank you.
Any questions on debt? Okay. I'll move into the next section, which is self-insurance funds. So this area is where we show the costs and the revenues for health insurance and for our workers' compensation insurance. So really, it just shows the premiums from employees and from department budgets. Those fund the claims, and the claims come out as costs. So, you know, typically the numbers are what they are. But there's an initiative in here that I wanted to point out, and that is that there's some funding that's going to be set aside for analyzing, proposing, and executing some various cost savings and ROI initiatives that are in this fund. Currently, you'll see that they're shown as a position, but this may very well be used to fund a consultant instead, the dollars. If that makes more sense. So we're still talking about that piece. So this is not the last time we'll be talking about this as a group, but it was important to note this in the budget presentation. That initiative is planned to be funded with fund balance, so the health insurance fund balance specifically, but it's really intended to pay for itself within 3 or so years. I see Josh has some.
So this is an initiative I've been driving Aaron and Matt nuts with for probably the last 18 months. But think about this the same way when we created the public affairs coordinator. If you remember at that time, we created the position really with one-time funding and said, you have X amount of years to give us a return of so many dollars. And if you've done that, we'll keep the position for another 2 years. This is exactly the same thing, which is why it may be a consultant, it may be a position. We haven't decided that yet. But what we found is we build a nice fund balance, so we have some dollars to be able to do this. But the overall cost of health insurance specifically has plenty of room for downward growth, if you will, driving that number down, total cost to the county, total cost to the employee. And so that's what this is really aimed to do. If we can get a handle on health insurance costs, like Act 10 help us get a handle on WRS, that could be another rabbit out of the hat that really solves some big problems, conservative reform for the county for many, many years to come. So just wanted to make sure you understand that when administrative committee starts looking at this in 2022 and 2023, or whatever that committee's is at that time under the new board, you'll be seeing that dashboard just like you did with the public affairs coordinator position. Here's how much their goals for how much they need to save. Here's where they're at. Here's the initiatives they're working on, until such time as we get towards the end of this budget and say, okay, did it work or didn't it work? And should we keep it or should we not keep it? So just want to be clear and show you an example of how we've done that before.
Thank you.
A lot of organizations are seeing 10 to 15% increases every year on their health insurance for at least the last 20 years.
Oops, sorry, that was my fault.
Over, say, the last 5 years or 10 years, as far as average annual health insurance cost increases.
Right off the top of my head, I would say we're way below 10% per year. We're nowhere near
Okay.
that. In the last 5 years, I would say we're averaging less than 5%, maybe 3%.
So, yeah,
We're way below average, but it's a sound wave. Health insurance is a sound wave, so you get good when you're self-insured.
Yeah.
When you're fully insured, it's a different story because you're relying on Blue Cross and Blue Shield or Anthem or whoever is your
to even
full
things out.
insurer.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, this is them evening things out. But for us, because we're self-insured, we can regulate that a little bit more. What throws a chink in that armor is when you have a number of high cost claims. So the terrible things that you can imagine in health insurance, cancer, things that are bad like that. When those happen and they are strung out over time, they really start to hemorrhage a health insurance fund. So a $5 million fund balance on an $8 million fund sounds awesome, and it is awesome. If you get 2 or 3 or 4 catastrophic health situations like that in your fund, that 5 million can be gone in a year or two. So that's exactly why we wanted to take a little bit of that fund balance and allocate it to someone to drive down the operating costs while not totally eating into that fund balance. Because like most governments, the habit generally would be just raid the fund balance and backfill until you run out of it. We're kind of trying to do it the other way. Same thing with the employee workout program that we're trying to get people to do wellness initiatives and stuff like that.
Yeah. So overall, I'm in support of this for exactly the reasons you just mentioned. This is the responsible way to approach health insurance. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? And
There's no questions. There's one more area to talk about, and that's what we're currently calling, non-departmental. So again, things that have a countywide impact and it can't be attributed necessarily to specific departments. We budget them in non-departmental. Right off the bat, we also budget sales tax in here, particularly the sales tax that we use to offset operations, to fund some of the operations. You'll see in 2022 and 23, we have about, between 7.7 and $7.6 million in sales tax to fund operations. This is an increase of almost $2.75 million. And so, to Josh's point earlier, we've been chasing this sales tax growth for a number of years and keeps pleasantly surprising us. This budget itself has a total of about $14.47 million in sales tax between CIP and operations. We're confident in this estimate. And matter of fact, today, Forward Analytics, which is the research division of the Wisconsin Counties Association, they actually released their sales tax estimates by county this morning. And we're within 0.08% of each other. So those estimates, we're pretty confident in them moving forward. Switching to the cost section, the expenditures. There are some personnel costs in here for the first time. So if you recall, it's not to fund positions in this area, but if you recall, our comp plan gives merit increases based on a performance appraisal score. So as a result, we don't necessarily know how those merit increases are going to impact department by department, just given that, you know, some departments score differently than others and things like that. So we're budgeting some dollars centrally, so it's easier to sort of deploy those merit increases from a technical perspective. There's $125,000 in both years of the biennium. There's also $300,000 budgeted in 2022 to allow us some flexibility as we sort of gauge total compensation that we provide in comparison to some of those other counties in our market. As you recall, we're a market-based compensation plan, so we're always looking at what other areas are doing so that we can remain competitive.
Supervisor Kelly.
To dumb it up a bit, Aaron. Basically what you're saying here is because with our new pay structure system, we have no idea just how much of a difference it would make from department to department, that you've created this pool that the various departments can draw upon based on how their people are performing. And then in the end, you'll roll that into the next budget where you'll be able to recorrect everything.
So that's basically correct. Yes. We're not necessarily spending it out of this area. You know, you'll likely see some sort of a budget correction once those numbers actually come in, and we'll take these funds and move them to the budgets where they
You'll baseline it back to the department's budget in the next budget, obviously, because now they're making that money. And then you would probably do another pool like this again, because this is something you're going to do continuously, I would imagine, based on the structure of our pay.
That's correct. These dollars in one budget go out, they're built into those people's base pay, and then you move into the next biennium.
And based on department performance, it may not end up changing. So if a department has a particularly good year, able to actually cut their budget by a certain amount, that's what would be used to backfill the merit increases rather than this pool. So it may or may not affect the pool at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd say that's accurate.
Then I do have it. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? County Executive Shulman.
Do you have anything else?
I've got a couple more, just
why don't
two
you
more
finish up,
points.
if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, finish up.
Thanks. This budget also creates a couple of pools of money to fund initiatives across the biennium. So when I say pools, I mean the funds will be budgeted in 22, and those unspent dollars get carried over into 23. These initiatives are things that you've approved in the past. A couple of them were approved yet this year, so there were dollars freed up in 21 that will also be carried over into these pools to fund some of these initiatives. So these initiatives are there's $200,000 in the budget to fund the newsletter. So again, this funds it for 2 years and likely more than that. Another initiative is $180,000 is in here to fund the county's lobbying efforts across the biennium. That's lobbying at both the state and the federal level. I'll leave it to Josh to sort of touch on some of the things that are happening now. But again, this is something that funding was approved this year. We're doing it now. These funds in the budget represent a continuation of that. Last is the strategic priorities dollars. So you'll recall that, I mean, this committee has approved using this pool of dollars several times this year already. And really it's exactly as it's described, or as it's titled. It's dollars used to fund the strategic priorities of the county. Given some of the big issues coming up in this budget, coming up in general, this budget is injecting about $500,000 into this pool of dollars in 2022. So again, that pool gets rolled from year to year and funds the strategic priorities of the county. So with that, I'll turn it over to Josh if he's got anything to add. He's better at explaining the policy side. I'm good at explaining what's technically happening in here, but
Yeah, that's right. So Aaron's personality, green type, is really good at all the cranking the numbers and making sure I'm not completely nuts. But there's a number of things that are really important for you to understand that are happening here. First, I'll draw your attention to this expenditure area. Now I'm in the non-departmental area. Under expenditures, there's one called other expenses, and in parentheses, including strategic priorities. You'll notice in 2022, that's $743,000. And that's a big number relative to what we've done in the past. But what you need to understand is when we closed out the EDWC revolving loan fund, that's $2 million of sales tax every single year. Okay. So $1 million of it is going to help us fund the radio debt and so on and so forth. $1 million of it is going to help with operational stuff. But it gives us this big number in the first year of the biennium. We're also then going to use some of that for operating in the second year of the biennium, which is why you see it drop off from 743 to 35. Okay, so you get the full chunk in 22, but then part of it gets eaten up in 23, if that makes sense. It's like getting a giant raise in 1 year, but you got to figure out how to live within your means for the next several years. That's what we're doing. We're banking it, if you will, into the strategic priorities fund, and you'll be able to use that for one-time expenses for years to come. Okay. So that's important to understand. Secondly, at the very bottom in the revenues and other sources area, it's kind of that last spreadsheet, two rows. The far right, bottom right-hand corner, $500,000 represents the use of the property tax relief fund. You remember I came to you with this concept, 2 or 3 months ago, that we create a property tax relief fund. What you're going to see when we come to you in the month of October, we're going to actually create that fund. It's a fund that's above and beyond what we've done during my tenure here with fund balance or assigned fund balance. I've always referred to it as the county savings account. These are dollars above and beyond that savings account. We've done so well budgeting in the last 7 or 8 years that we've got this overflow that is actually, when we get into actually having the overflow account, it immediately is going to be full. So you'll get a policy that says that overflow account or that property tax relief fund should be X amount of dollars. And as of today, you have more than X amount of X plus $1 million, actually almost. So what we're going to do in this budget is we're going to deficit spend. It sounds bad, but really what you're doing is you're spending down the property tax relief fund. You're doing exactly what you're designing it for. Okay, we've overtaxed you for a few years. It wasn't intentional. It actually is a product of good budgeting. And so we're going to give it back to you by cutting the levy for one year in this particular case out of the 2-year biennium. And we're already planning for how to backfill that if need be. And if we end good years in the budget, we may just do it again. That's different. It's the same thing, but a different strategy for what we used to do. If you remember when I first got to the county, we had a $1.9 million budget deficit planned, but there was no strategic reasoning for why we were doing it. In other words, we were using fund balance to plug a budget hole. Now we're strategically using fund balance to give people their money back. Okay, so there's going to be a strategy that's involved over many years. I think I'm going to freak my colleagues out here, but I think we can do this for upwards of a decade. That's extremely, that listen to all these like heavy breathing happening from bureaucrats. I love it. But I really do think the way that we budget and the way that we operate, we can do this for a decade. And be cognizant that every other year we look closely, okay, maybe this year we can't, maybe the next year we'll go a little farther. But it's important to understand what's really happening there. And that is part of what helps to explain we're not just not taking net new construction, we're also cutting the levy. And what you'll notice as the department budgets come to you, and I know administrative has already come to that committee, and public safety as well, as my understanding, as those budgets come to you, departments don't even know the difference, because the way that we've budgeted, the RLF fell off. We treated it like a debt. Now we're able to take that, just like if your car payment was finalized, now we can shift that to other things, which is historically been net new construction. Now other departments are getting that same money just from a different source, and they don't know the difference. So we'll do that again in the next biennium, because we have debt coming off for the road projects that we had done several years ago. And then we'll be able to do it again in a few years. Plus we'll have this property tax relief fund building. So there's a lot of moving parts, as somebody said a little bit earlier, to all these different things. And it's hard to dive in, even in a line item budget, and explain these things. But fortunately, between my orange creative personality and people who are very pragmatic and slow and get really concerned when I start to throw out ideas, we're able to work our way through making stuff like this work consistently for 8 years. And the proof in the pudding is accountants and budget folks are constantly vetting what are we actually doing. Yes, Josh, your idea is great, but here's how it functionally works. And okay, yeah, we can make it work. Now, I say all that and I'm going to freak them out one more time. One of the things that we can do with the American Recovery Plan Act, and I'll come to the Land Use and Planning Committee meeting next month, and ultimately back to your committee in a couple of months, or excuse me, in the month of October. One of the things we can do is utilize it for kind of a laundry list of things. We're going to propose achieving some of our strategic priorities that I talked about with you in the past at my State of the County and other things. But another thing that we can do at the state and local level that, excuse me, at the local level that the state cannot do is we can cut taxes with it. We have not done that in this budget. We did not use one-time money to cut property taxes. We didn't do that because the problem with doing that is once you've made that cut, later on, you have to go back and get it, which means somewhere down the road, you have to raise taxes to get back what you've cut. I didn't feel comfortable as executive proposing us doing that. However, from now until October, I'm going to ask you as the executive committee to think about whether or not we should actually just in fact do that. And the reason I want you to think about it is we have a $26.2 million fund that you approved last month. We have a whole list of strategic return on investment type of initiatives that we want to start working through and bringing to your committees, just like we did throughout the pandemic, to get your blessing on. But as I've told our staff many times during this budget process, when we're sitting on fund balances that are above our policy and above our property tax relief fund policy, I get really anxious because it's not our freaking money. It's the people's money. So if at the end, the county board decides, nope, we need to make a one-time cut, and we know full well that we're going to go back, I can get on that train, but just know we're going to have to raise taxes then. And I'm not a big fan of doing that either. So I think it's a good public policy discussion for us to have. We didn't do it at this stage because I know there will be people that do it and find themselves in a deep, deep hole. I've actually lived through that before. It's awful. But if that's something you want to see, when we come back to you for the public hearing, that's really your last chance to make any changes of that variety. I would ask you to think about it for a month, bring it up at that time, or certainly before would be better. And we can certainly talk about if and how we might do that. But as you can see, this budget by itself cuts $1 million over the biennium which is just under the biggest tax levy cut we've ever proposed in a budget. So I'm very, very proud of the work that Aaron and Margie and the entire team did to make this day possible. And I'm very proud of this budget. And I'm here to tell you, we can do better and we can go farther. The question is, do you want to do it all in one budget, or do you want to see it happen slowly over the course of many budgets? So I think we're prepared to take any questions if you have them.
Is there any questions? Supervisor Mahalik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. County Executive Showman, thank you for that presentation. And I'm very interested in making sure that everybody realizes that all of the communities in Washington County, and especially the Washington County itself, because of the growth in Washington County, has no reason to raise taxes. We just passed our 5-year CIP budget, our capital improvement plan at Hartford yesterday at the city council meeting, and it's flat or goes down in certain areas. There is no reason, and we're improving services. There's no reason that you can't do this considering the growth that we're experiencing in Washington County. Anybody that would vote for a tax increase, especially with all the things that families are dealing with right now, really has to question why they are running for office to represent Washington County or any of the municipalities. We're sitting in a very good position right now, and we do have undesignated fund balance, not only in the county, we also have it in the city of Hartford. I always called it the, gee, we taxed you too much, but we're not giving it back fund. Okay. And there is some benefit to it. And one of them is, of course, and I'm sure Josh, you'd agree, is the fact that it really does help your bond rating. The best way to prove that you're really worth the risk of lending money is to prove that you don't really need the money because you already have it. And interestingly enough, when you have that type of a fund balance, you do get a very good bond rating, which means that you're borrowing money at the lowest possible rate for when you do things like major road constructions or building, as an example, in a city, if you're building a new fire station or police station, something along that line, or updating your septic system, your sewer system, your sewer treatment plant. You're talking millions or even tens of millions of dollars in expense, and then you're going to have to borrow. It's great to have a good loan value as regards to being able to get the money as cheap as you possibly can, because that directly hits the levy. So kudos to you and what you've been able to do. I will certainly support the budget. I think it's great that we're going in the right direction, improving services, lowering taxes. I tell you, anybody that can do that, I mean, you've got your wizard's hat on, and Hartford's been doing it. I know some of the other communities in Washington County are doing it, and it's great to know that Washington County is doing it. Now we just got to teach the state, the federal government how to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thanks, Margie.
Thanks.
On to action items. 6A, resolution, initial resolution authorizing 13 million general obligation bonds for emergency communication system project. Entertain a motion. Supervisor Bossert, Supervisor Schleif. Get you guys next. Okay. Is there any discussion on this? Supervisor Bossert.
The resolution that we believe we're ultimately going to need to borrow 15 million, but we're only borrowing 13 million right now. And I want to say I like that approach. I would rather come back and ask for more money than ask for more money now and then try to find ways to spend it. A lot of situations, governments overborrow, and then instead of giving that money back, they find frivolous stuff to spend it on. So I like that. Do you want to elaborate on how we're going to pay that remaining 2 million if we need it?
So we've discussed a few options. One is we may not even need the full 2 million. There's a contingency built into the project, which those funds may not be needed. We also, as Josh has talked about several times this evening, have excess fund balance currently in place. So we've also discussed essentially setting aside a portion of that in case we do need it. I got a question for our county attorney after the meeting tonight that may have another small bucket of funds available that we overlooked previously for the jail expansion savings. So, so we've got it. We know it's there. We at the minimum will reserve fund balance in case we do need it, which then if it's not used, just drops back into the general balances. So.
County Executive Showman.
Yeah, and just to be clear, only because you stated this, there's no scenario where we'll come back to borrow an additional 2 million. Just that's not an option. At least not as long as I'm county executive. So just so you know that, I mean, I think this is one of those where ARPA money very well may qualify if we're able to tie broadband in particularly, and it is definitely on our radar, on Dave Barber's radar, as something that we'd be contemplating and having active conversations with the sheriff about that. So as Margie stated, there's a number of opportunity areas. The best scenario would be we're actually able to crank down some of these contractors and consultants and get that number significantly down below 2 million, including not having to spend out contingency. But we'll see where it goes.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. You opposed? Motion carries. Action item 6B, resolution providing for the sale of $13 million general obligation communications project bond series 2021. Entertain a motion, Supervisor Dice, Supervisor Mary. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes. Our next meeting date is Wednesday, October 20th, 2021, 6 p.m. That is the